Thank you very much for joining us on this very gracious and glorious day.
It's a great pleasure having you.
Thanks ever so much, ma'am. Without further ado, I bring you Miss Rosa Branson. How are you, ma'am?
I'm very well.
Ma'am, today, a special day. We're going to start from the very beginning of your being. And I think that should start with your parents, your wonderful parents. Please tell us a bit about your parents, and I'll join you cohesively.
My parents came from very wealthy families, and they met at a charity concert. And they went and sat in Lyon's tea shop and discussed the world, and were very, very shocked at the poverty, because in those days there was no help. If you were dying, you just died. And they wanted to help the poor. And so they decided to get married within 10 days, moved to Battersea, joined the Communist Party.
The Communist Party?
Because in those days communism was a dream, which has changed a bit. But it was a dream.
When you say it was a dream, what's...
Well, the dream was that those who did the work should not be treated like slaves.
Okay.
They should be looked after and cared for because they did the work.
Okay.
But anyway, they joined the Communist Party and gave away a lot of money. My mother said, if you have enough to eat and you're warm and you don't have to worry about it, you don't need tons and tons of money.
Wow.
And so she gave away a whole lot of money to help the poor and devoted her life to actually thinking what you could do to help people.
Interesting. It's very admirable.
And this is what they did. And my father was very much the same, but he was an artist.
Okay.
And he loved painting people, real people.
Okay.
Anyway, he was in. Yeah, I mean, he was in the army. And actually, my grandfather was in the British Army in India.
Okay.
And because my father came from that sort of family.
Interesting. Yes.
And my grandfather was up in the hills of India.
Okay. But something that stood out remarkable, or something very unusual about both your parents were their desire to help humanity, to help fellow mankind.
Oh, I know.
And they didn't just do that, they actually sacrificed their heritage. For instance...
Well, they said that the rich were so bored. They just sat at home in big stately homes, being bored stiff. And everybody married for money and they weren't happy. And my mother said it's crazy, it's wrong. And they're just being miserable. They were being selfish and bored. And so my parents decided that helping people was much more interesting.
Much more interesting. Amazing.
But my mother said, and my uncle, who was the Marquis of Sligo, I remember he came to see me once, and he looked at this house and he said, "You're so lucky. In Westport House we've got 2 miles of gutters."
2 miles.
Well, fancy having 2 miles of gutters in your house.
2 miles of gutters. So it's a stately home.
It was a great big stately home.
Yeah, and I think...
and it was all like that. They all were concerned about money. They were concerned about marrying other people who had money. My mother said everybody married for money, and they weren't happy. It was miserable.
The aristocratic family that you come from, and despite that lineage of immense wealth, you know, because your grandparents were aristocrats, they still felt better to leave all that behind and help the poor.
Oh yes, they did. Well, no, my mother's mother died of tuberculosis when she was 8, and her father was killed on the Somme when she was 9.
Wow.
And so both her parents died, and she only heard this from listening to the servants talking about it in the hall in their stately home.
Because she'd often thought the uncle was actually her dad.
Yeah.
Interesting. And despite the upbringing that she had, she still left all that wealth
Oh yes.
and still moved to London.
No, she just, it was terrible. But she said, but actually, my mother's lot, I realised my mother was a very tough lady.
Okay, yes.
Partly because I think we were descended from Grace O'Malley.
That's right.
And Grace O'Malley was the lady pirate who ran the whole of West of Ireland.
Absolutely.
And she apparently went to Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes.
And said she was fed up with being treated badly.
By the
because she was a woman.
Okay.
And so Queen Elizabeth I put out a notice to say to go back to her lawful business of being a pirate. She ran the whole of the West of Ireland. What she did was that if the big rich people sailed past, she would ask them if they could stop and help the poor.
Okay.
And if they wouldn't, she would then loot the boat.
I see. That's interesting. So,
but she was very famous Lady Pirate, and Henry VIII, I think it was Henry VIII, wanted her to be got rid of. He sent Francis Drake round to get her, and she was just absolutely furious. Cheek.
Grace O'Malley. So there's your lineage for you.
That's from my mother.
From your mother.
Yeah.
And from your dad. I mean, your dad was a banker. And,
they were bankers.
They were bankers. So left and right of you is immense wealth.
That's right. But my mother's family thought that it was very vulgar to marry somebody who was involved with banking.
Yes.
And my mother's family thought, she was going beneath herself because she was Lady Noreen.
That's right. Lady Noreen Brown.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And she was absolutely furious when they announced over the thing that she was officially now Lady Noreen Brown. She was furious.
And this pivotal factor still remains. It resonates with me personally. The fact that I'm so in awe of anyone that can leave their wealth behind for the betterment of fellow mankind.
Well, I think when people are that rich, they're not afraid of not being rich.
Ah, interesting. Well, I've never been that rich, so I don't.
They can't imagine not having enough to eat.
So such is the wealth that it's not in their thinking to have less.
No.
You just take that wealth so for granted that you can only visualize yourself as always being wealth, because the wealth is just beyond.
My mother said they were so bored. They sat in their stately homes reading a book, and if you got bored with it, you just threw it on the floor. The footman came in and picked it up.
So waited on hand and foot.
Yeah, and you just didn't do anything.
All days of the year.
And she said they were so bored.
Interesting. Do you think your parents at any point in time missed what they sacrificed?
No,
the heritage?
they were delighted to get rid of it.
They were delighted to sacrifice such wealth.
Right,
such wealth as huge as you never been able to imagine yourself not having it. Yet they sacrificed it to look after the poor.
Well, to do something where you were helping people.
Amazing.
Makes you much happier to help people than to sit about feeling important.
For me, as an African descendant, hearing that, see, I'm already stuttering. That's how emotional it is for me. Because it's emotional because we have African leaders who steal from the African countries and bring the money to these shores, to the Western countries, at the expense and at the demise of the African fellow men.
This is bad.
And here you are, a descendant of a super wealthy families, and yet they chose to leave what was their legacy, their heritage. They had the bona fide rights to it, to do with it as they please. They left it behind, came to London. How was Battersea for you, ma'am?
My greatest friend was Leo.
Okay.
who I was 4 at the time, and he was 11.
Wow.
And he ran the gang that used to smash light bulbs.
Okay.
And I was the only person who trusted him, and therefore he liked looking after me.
Okay.
So he used to look after me, which
Uh-huh.
meant that the rest of the gang couldn't be horrid to me in case he looked after me. And we used to go for walks in Battersea Park together,
Okay.
because he liked me.
Uh-huh.
And then the ladies from our road came to my mother
Uh-huh.
and said, "You can't let her be friends with him. He's a hooligan."
Ah.
My mother said, "I can't see any harm in him. He's not a capitalist."
Oh, there you go. Such was our foresight and vision.
Well, I don't know what's happened to Leo now, because a
Oh,
bit
it's
later
probably-
on the war started. God, he's probably been in
Bless
prison.
him. What else do you remember about Battersea, southwest London?
I remember thinking it was a very ugly place.
Okay, when you
And
arrived.
the only beautiful thing was the sky.
Now that's speaking.
I remember thinking that. And my father did paintings of that area,
He did? Paintings? Okay.
and my mother helped various charities and things, and was learning the piano and all that kind of stuff. And my mother was an air raid warden in the Blitz in London.
She was. She's
I was evacuated to the countryside,
correct, yes.
to a boarding school.
And how was your experience in the boarding schools?
I was very lonely.
It's because you was missing your both parents, obviously.
Yes, I was. They felt I was stupid. Well, one of the reasons I was stupid is because I couldn't read, and I couldn't read because I needed glasses, and nobody realised it.
And how long did it take before anyone realised you
My
needed
grandparents
spectacles?
suddenly realised it when I was 9. Well, I remember one day when I had measles. I was in a dormitory with measles, and there were 5 of them having measles. And I lay in this dormitory, and I did drawings of these 5 children, and I drew them all looking horrible. And I felt very pleased with myself. And the matron came in and said, "What lovely drawings."
Really?
And I thought, "You don't know what you're talking about."
Interesting. Because she...
I used art as a way of survival.
Interesting. So you then used you creatively transformed
I
the
used
negative
art.
energy.
And I still do.
You still do. So use your artistry.
If somebody's horrible to me, I paint them as the devil.
We now go to your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've not said a lot about him apart from the fact that he was a banker and he's on, ancestral lineage.
Yeah.
It's
Well, he
very
wasn't
sensitive.
a banker. His grandfather was.
His grandfather was a banker. Yes, actually, thanks for correcting me because he wanted to go to the Slades, didn't
Yes,
he?
he became a painter.
When he met your mum, that's correct.
Yeah.
Thanks for that correction. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and how was this? Do you know anything about how the Slade was for your dad or his experiences at the Slade?
He liked it very much, and he had great friends there.
Hmm.
And when I went to the Slade, I was introduced to Professor Coldstream, who apparently had been a great friend of my dad's when they were both at the Slade together.
Okay. And his advice to you then was?
That he said, I think it was him who said, "You can't really be a painter because women have to, because you have to paint for 6 hours a day." And I thought, right, I'll paint for 7 hours a day.
Okay, all right. That said, because going to the Slade now, we sort of jumped over one pivotal institution, which is the Camberwell College of Arts.
Yeah.
You did go to Camberwell College of Arts.
Yeah.
And what were your experiences with
The same
Camberwell?
thing as what I was learning at the Slade, because they were the same teachers.
Oh, I see. Okay.
We were all being taught to paint modern.
And from what I've heard that you've told me several times, the modern style of oil painting was not your cup of tea by any means.
No.
You had your own visions, your own dreams, your own ideals about what painting really should be, especially. And what is that, ma'am, your style of painting?
well, like the Renaissance. But the point was that in the old days, when they started this sort of modern art, if you put brushstrokes on, it showed your deeper feelings with the brushstroke.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to paint the sky. I don't want to look as got measles, brushstrokes all over the place. I want it to look like the sky.
So just splatter it all over the place.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
So there's something about artists, the Renaissance artists, the old masters, as you quite rightly call them.
Well, they hadn't invented photography in those days, so the only way to experience what you saw was to paint it as if it looked like it.
Remarkable. Thank you.
But then they invented photography, and everybody said it was like old-fashioned photographs.
And this is where you come in, because you are yourself a master, and the world is going to see why we say that. I believe your mom took you to the National Gallery.
Yes, she did.
And said to you the paintings that you saw.
She took me around the National Gallery when I was 6, just before the war, and said, "Your dad says these are the greatest painters in the world." And I remember looking up at them and thinking, "Okay, Daddy, I'm going to do it."
And that dream never departed from you.
Come on, trying.
You've done it remarkably well, ma'am. And I must say at this point in time as well, whilst of course the due diligence and credit has been attributed to your proteges, having compared their work and yours, I think they still have some way to go. It's got to be said. They're younger. That is so perfectly put. There's no better way to put that, because there's no way I would denigrate their
artistry. I've done my
artistry.
best work since I was 70.
Since you were 70?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a statement. You've done your best work.
Well, the big charity paintings.
Yeah, since you were 70.
Yeah.
So these are in a different class and category.
Well, I've got more understanding of what I'm doing. The more you know, the more you realise you don't know.
Wow.
So you go on learning.
I like that.
And you go on learning and you go on learning. The day you think you know it all, you'll be finished.
You're finished. That's a statement of
and so I think
enormous
this is why
humility.
you go on getting better until your eyesight goes squiff, and then you can't do it anyway.
This is so true. It's interesting you say that. I think it was Louis Armstrong who stated, Satchmo stated, you don't retire from music.
Yeah, same sort of thing.
Until you cannot play no
That's
more.
Right. Until you can't hear. I know, or something. Same thing.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I want us to talk about your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've noticed you're very emotional when your dad's name's being mentioned, because you still call him Daddy.
Well, I do. I still think of him as Daddy.
Say that again, please.
I still think of him as Daddy.
Yes, that is so sensitive. It's so warm, so congenial, so emotional. You know, because the last time you saw him was how old? At what age were you?
6.
6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw him obviously from up until the age of 6,
Yeah.
and then he went away.
Then he went, and that was it.
And that was it. You never saw him anymore. Any memorabilia from him?
I had letters from him. There were lots of letters.
He'd fought 2 wars, didn't he?
No, he made.
He went to the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, he fought in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
And then after that, he went to the Burmese War.
Yeah, that's right. Well, fighting the Japanese.
So he fought Franco.
Yeah, that's right.
In the Spanish Civil War.
That's right.
And he got released. There's something about him being released, wasn't it? And where did he draw the inmates? Where they supplied him some?
He was in a camp.
Yeah.
You know, of prisoners.
And they identified him.
Yeah.
His name and.
That's right. He was a great friend of the cousin of the King of Spain.
Right. Okay.
And the chap running the camp suddenly was horrified.
That
but one of their soldiers
yeah.
was... so he'd better be treating him decently.
Special, yeah.
So he said to him, what would you like? And my dad said, I'd like some paintings and paint. So they sent him off to Madrid to get some oil paint.
Remarkable.
My dad 6 paintings for the Tate, which have gone into the Tate.
So he's got 6 paintings at the Tate.
Well, yes, he's got more than that actually.
Oh gosh, yeah. But you gave 6 to the state, so to speak.
Well, I mean, he did them for the country.
But what they?
But the prison, the war chap kept 2 of them.
Okay.
And they're still in.
So there were 8 altogether.
No, there were 6 altogether. He did 6.
He did 6, but 4 were given to the state.
Four have come back.
So, Camberwell College of Arts was not what you envisaged it to be.
Well,
after 3 years,
I was told that it was modern, and I decided it was awful.
mm-hmm. And in all those 3 years, because you studied there for 3 years, graduated from Camberwell College of Arts,
yeah,
and then went on to the Slade.
Yes, that's right.
You then realised the same lecturers that you had at Camberwell College of Arts
right.
were then there to teach you at the Slade. So you didn't finish your curriculum, at the Slade. You was only there for a year.
Yeah, that's right. I left it.
And it was Professor Coldstream who actually sort of he was instrumental in you going to the National Gallery. Am I right in saying?
Not necessarily.
No? Okay.
No, the chap who was the chief restorer of the National Gallery got permission to lecture in the art schools.
Dr. Ruman, Professor Ruman. Is
Yeah.
it Dr. Ruman? Dr. Ruman.
No, Professor Ruman.
Professor Ruman? Okay.
Ruman, anyway.
Yeah.
But he got it.
Okay.
And I saw him give these 3 lectures,
Uh-huh.
which was 1 a week, and letting the paint dry,
Okay.
so you could show the layers.
Okay.
And I thought, this is what I want to know.
Fantastic.
And everybody else said, oh God, how old-fashioned, how boring. Took no notice of it. And I thought, no, this is what I want to know.
You remain determined, resolute.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And Dr. Ruman, because I need to sort of pin it down.
Well then, when I got permission to copy in the National Gallery, which I got free,
yeah,
and I used to go there once a week, or twice a week.
Okay.
And they would set up the easel for you and make the place for you, and you can paint there all day. But every time I was there, Dr. Roman would appear behind me and say, why didn't you try this?
Okay.
And I copied each type of painting in the National Gallery until I knew them all, how they worked.
Amazing.